The perished or any story tonight is actually someone who survived and see how we can try and step into their shoes more emotionally through movement rather than just factually through what happened. So just in case anybody's not familiar, we are the Tree of Life. The mission is to reinvigorate the discussion around the Holocaust through the universal language of art. We are the Tree of Life explores the lives and experiences of Jewish artists, those that survived and those that perished, passing their legacy to us and to future generations. The Holocaust cannot be grasped or logically explained, but we may connect to it through the emotions of the artists. The intimacy of the artwork speaks to the human soul to connect with the artists to better comprehend the horrors they faced. By combining the performative nature of different art forms, from dance to music and visual arts, We Are the Tree of Life communicates cross-culturally and intergenerationally, facilitated by discussions with modern artists reflecting on those works, their creators, and their lives. So without further ado, a little bit just about myself. For those who don't know me, I'm Tammuz. I'm a dancer and a choreographer. I myself am a third generation Holocaust survivor, actually from both sides, from my father's mother and from my mother's father. I was raised here, but I was born in Israel, and now actually I moved back to Israel. I'm just here this week for this one event. And I speak and work around the Holocaust, both with We Are the Tree of Life and then separately just communicating, educating about the Holocaust, actually international different events. And the best way to really start is just to show you by example what it is that we do in We Are the Tree of Life and some of my work. So, of course, there's the numbers that we can't really connect to, the 6 million, the numbers that scale far beyond kind of our comprehension as individuals. But by bringing it back to the individual level, we can try and comprehend it through a new way. So I'll start with just showing you an example, one of the previous pieces. And the previous piece was about Francesca Ma. She was a beautiful dancer herself, considered one of the most beautiful and promising dancers in Poland. And she was taken to Auschwitz. And during her time there, when they asked her to undress, she actually used that opportunity to sort of seduce them and perform a striptease of sorts. And while she undressed seductively, she was able to kind of move and get closer to guards to the point where it said that she took her heel and stabbed one of the guards, was able to get their firearm, and then used it to actually kill one and injure another. So that story, right now you understand it, that's actually what happened, but there's a lot around the experience that's harder for us to kind of step into her shoes and connect and experience it. So that the point of what we're doing here is to see through movement and kind of seeing the dance of it, we can get to that deeper understanding. So in this piece, it actually starts off really silent. Okay, so that was a short piece there. So the elements that I want to just take a moment to think about that we didn't get when we were just looking at the story is everything from her physicality, how she moved, to how she experienced that moment. Right, there's an element here of breathing that I tried to emphasize. You could hear it in the music. There's the element of kind of the idea coming up. Right, if you try and step in her shoes, this wasn't necessarily pre-planned. She was actually misled. She didn't know they were going to Auschwitz. And she sort of had to come up with that idea on the fly. So part of this was meant to be through the movement and the dance, stepping into her shoes, realizing what she's doing in real time as she's doing it, right? And seeing kind of the opportunity and taking the initiative to do something further, just give in and obey. And the intention with this choreography is to actually communicate that a little bit and take you also into her point of view and stepping into her shoes and realizing anywhere from the adrenaline rush to the fear and the terror of knowing what's going to happen to realizing, committing to the fact that as soon as you pull the firearm from the individual, if before you didn't know you were going to die, now you for sure know you're going to die. So there's a lot more to the story than just 3 sentences here. And they really can't know. There's a context, there's what she experienced, but through movement we can try and take a step back and see what emotions she experienced by realizing what movements she had to have done that. Okay, so now let's just think about it a little further. Eventually we'll tie into the new piece that's going to premiere tonight, and we'll talk about the story and how the choreography came to be. But first, let's kind of think about what the choreography is. There's lots of elements at play. There's the music, so we'll take a moment to listen to a little later. You'll see that just the music itself can trigger emotions and hopefully get you in that state of mind to capture the story in a new and deeper and more emotional state. And then there's the story itself, right? So there's a lot to communicate, right? We're trying to capture lifetimes within a few minutes of choreography. But we are able to communicate something a little more raw, a little more kind of humanistic through movement than what we're able to share, let's say, through normal words or pictures. And that's what we're trying to do here in the Other Shade Life, and really facilitate new discussions and new connections and new perspectives around the Holocaust. So in this next piece, we're talking about Marcel Marceau. And I'll let this play. So Marcel Marceau was a mime, you'll see here. And during the Holocaust, this was actually before his fame as a mime. He was just starting, he was 17 years old, more or less. And during the Holocaust, he worked with the French resistance. So then maybe you're wondering how does a mime connect to the Holocaust? And how does this talent of his actually come to play? And that's actually the beautiful part, that his theatrical talents, he actually used them in his resistance. It's quite mesmerizing. So in his involvement in the French resistance, he helped save at least 70 Jewish children. And he did this by helping them cross the border, right, to Sweden, into Switzerland, sorry. And he actually used his talent in theatrics to help calm them down. So the idea was that as they cross, they're supposed to pretend that they're Boy Scouts, and of course that they're not Jewish. So if ever they're intercepted, they feel comfortable and they play the part, and let's say they don't look guilty, so they can pass forward freely. And he used his talent as a mime to help them relax. Sometimes through pantomime, to tell them to be quiet, to communicate with them. In ways it would be, let's say, not obviously, and the eyes of soldiers that may be passing by. And it's actually quite remarkable that it said that he was able to act and pretend to be a soldier and get 30 German soldiers to surrender just because he was acting and pretending there's a big troop behind him and getting to surrender and leave. So he's quite remarkable in his use of this talent as a mime, sort of in an unconventional way. And then again, we're seeing this piece and how we try and bring that to life through choreography and trying to communicate and kind of the juxtaposition you have to experience, right? Through the stress and intimidation that you face against World War II and Nazis and whatnot, to kind of the calm facade you have to put in front of the kids to get them relaxed, to get them to participate and play along in the way that you need them to. Okay, so the name of the game, at least for me in this choreography, was how do you handle incredibly serious, intense experiences that Marcel had to go through in a way that doesn't pass that fear on to the children he had to play with. And I call it play because the whole point here, as hopefully you sort of felt, was that everything he went through, it was all meant to be somehow a little more silly and a little more amiable for children, right? Take these very extreme experiences, but communicate them in almost a playful tone, which is why a lot of the movement here was meant to be ideally almost play-like, right? Even like serious situations, there's that portion where it's under the table, and you can imagine that could happen due to an actual threat. But even then, even an actual threat, you have to turn it into a playful scenario where now you're hanging off the table, you're dancing through the table. Yes, you're under the table because of, let's say, real threatening circumstances, but you're not gonna show that. You're gonna somehow twist it, somehow make it playful, somehow make it into a game, make it into a scenario where if you would imagine a child there with you, the child that wouldn't necessarily know how to read the situation would read how you react to the situation and would think, oh, it's okay. It's sort of we're in okay, it's almost playful. This is a game, I'll be relaxed, I'll play along. I'm not gonna go down this rabbit hole of terror and fear. And then of course there were other more logistical elements that I tried to communicate from the papers and all the strategizing and all the stuff behind the scenes that maybe we wouldn't think of when we think of, oh, he did this and that. Well, doing this and that involves a lot more behind the scenes that you and I aren't privileged to see. But even then, everything going on whenever there was any, let's say, children involved, at least my assumption was you would go into that playful mode, make it into a game, make it into almost a dreamlike child's dream, a playful, fun experience with your friends. And I know that sounds a little extreme, but that was kind of my take on it through my research. And this was also, he did all this before he became a famous mime. And it said that this is kind of this experience helped him develop to be the famous artist that he was. Okay. So now we talked a little bit about choreography and the elements that come into it, whether it's the music or the story you're trying to communicate to the movement. But now we'll talk about the dance itself, right? So what is dance? What is sort of being human? We're stuck in this physical embodiment, and we experience emotions. And that actually kind of comes hand to hand, right? So when you experience a certain emotion, you move and you experience it physically, it affects your movement, whether you're aware of it or not aware of it. And in some early dance classes, I remember we did these exercises where we moved. Let's say if you do a fist and you kind of listen to yourself, you'll see that you become more angry. Right? So it's a two-way link, it's bidirectional. You have emotions that lead to certain movements and the way that you move, and then the way that you move also leads to other emotions. Right? The whole fake it till you make it. We all know that sentence. So that saying is meant to be fake it, pretend you're comfortable, and eventually you'll feel more comfortable. So why is that important, sort of understanding the Holocaust, at least in my perspective, is because now we can't really understand, right? We don't know the context. We've never been in that context. Ideally, we'll never be in anything close to that context. But we can try and get to that emotional state that we can guess that they were at by figuring out the physicality that will lead us to that stage. So that was kind of what I was trying to do. In this next piece, I'm actually going to show you this piece twice. This is kind of the premiere. It'll be the first, actually the first to see it. So I'll show it to you first with no context, and then we'll talk about the story and why I chose it, and then you'll see it again with a lot more context. But this first time that we're going to see it, the whole point is just to see the movement, and from the movement try and understand the emotions. And at the very end, of course, I'll invite you on stage. We'll do some of the movements together and see if you can experience that emotional state from the movement. But that's really kind of the point here, to try and go kind of a human layer deeper for what happened factually, or at least what we know happened from here. It's from a testimonial, and try and get to what it was like to experience that emotion, at least to some extent, do the best that we can. So this next one is very new. It's not even online yet, so I will play it from here. You guys feel anything emotion-wise? Okay, I'll take the nodding as yes. Yeah, so this piece purposefully set with no context. And the idea here is to try and see the emotions behind it. I don't do justice to the emotions they experience because I could never get to that state. As I also hope that none of us would ever get to that state, really. But there's so many, you know the story very soon. A lot of them will make more sense. But I think there's something very raw just about communicating through movement. And movement can demonstrate emotions in a way that just words can't really do that. Or at least in my experience. I'm a mover and a dancer, so maybe I take it more too hard. But for me, movement sometimes show a layer deeper than we could otherwise. So now we'll get to this actual story. So for it, we need a little bit of context. So the context here is Babi Yar. And for those who don't know, Babi Yar was a Nazi-led massacre in Kiev in 1941. Today we're the day after Yom Kippur. This massacre actually happened the day before Yom Kippur. And during the two-day massacre, over 33,000 Jews were murdered. We're talking about in the scope of 2 days. And I chose this one because the after Yom Kippur today, it's happened the day before, but also because I have personal connections to it. And I personally visited Babi Yar with my family, and we did this in Hebrew it's called Tir Sholashim. And it's a trip to understand your roots. So my grandfather actually grew up there, and a lot of his family, perished. And we have a lot of relatives that are somewhere in Babi Yar. So I personally felt deep connection to it. And just so we understand the meaning of the numbers, because again, numbers are at that scope, anything past 10, but you can't really grasp it. So here at the 10. Now together tonight we're spending about an hour in this theater, and to get to 33,000 people in an hour, it means you need to kill 10 people every second. So every 1, 2, 3. Every one of those 10 people has to perish to get to the number that they reached, just so we can sort of get the uncomprehendable huge numbers that we're talking about. But again, we're not going to focus on those numbers. We're going to focus on individual. Right now, we're going to focus on Dina Onicheva. She has a very moving testimonial. If you Google her, you'll get to the Yad Vashem website right away. And if not, I'd love to email you the link. We don't have time to go into her full testimonial, but we'll just briefly read the parts that matter to the story. So my name is Tina. I came to love a Russian boy, married him. My passport identified me as a Russian. Before the war, I was an actress at Kiev Young Viewers Theater. My husband left for the front on the second day of the war, and I was left with our small children and a sick old mother. Posters on the city streets read the order: all the Jews of Kiev must gather at Babi Yar. So I took my daughter and son to my Russian mother-in-law. Afterwards, I took my sick mother, and we started out on our way to Babi Yar. The older people who had difficulty walking were sighing in a barely audible way, but they silently continued their path of sorrow. When we neared Babi Yar, shooting and inhumane cries could be heard. I started to grasp what was going on. When we entered the gate, we were ordered to hand over our documents and valuables and to take off our clothes. One German approached my mother and tore off her gold ring. Only then did my mother say, "Inochka, you are Onicheva, a Russian. You should save yourself. Run to your little ones. You should live for them." But I could not run. How could I leave my mother alone? I hugged her, burst into tears, but I could not leave her. My mother pushed me away from her, crying, "Go quickly." I approached the table where a fat officer was sitting, showed him my passport and said quietly, "I am a Russian." He looked closely at my passport, but at that moment, a policeman came running up and muttered, "Don't believe her. She's a kike. We know her." Each time I saw a new group of men and women, elderly people and children being forced to take off their clothes. All of them were being taken to an open pit where submachine gunners shot them. Then another group was brought. I saw a young woman, completely naked, nursing her naked baby when a policeman came running up to her, tore the baby from her breast, and threw it into the pit alive. The mother rushed there after her baby. The fascist shot her, and she fell down dead. The German brought me to some superior of his. The superior took the passport, examined it for a long time, and then muttered, "Dina is not a Russian name. You're a kike. Take her away." The policeman ordered me to strip and pushed me to a precipice. But before the shots resounded, I fell into the pit. I fell on the bodies of those already murdered. During the first moments, I couldn't grasp anything, either what I was or how I got there. I pretended to be dead. Those who had been killed or wounded were lying under me and on top of me. Many were still breathing, others were moaning. I saw the pit with thousands of dead bodies. In some places, the earth was heaving. People, half alive, were still breathing. I tried to stand up, but was unable to do so. Then I said to myself, "Dina, stand up, get away, run from here. Your children are waiting for you." So I stood up, and I started moving quietly toward the high hills surrounding the pit. Suddenly, I felt that something was moving behind me. I turned around quietly and asked, "Who are you?" I was answered by a thin, scared child's voice. "Auntie, don't be afraid, it's me. My name is Fima. My last name is Schneiderman. I'm 11 years old. Take me with you. I'm very afraid of the dark." We both started to move silently, but reached the top of the pit and were standing. A shot rang out. I moved closer to Flimochka. There was no sign of life. Apparently the shot that was heard a moment earlier took his life. I caressed the boy's cold face, bidding him farewell, and I stood up and started to run. I bolded the sections that actually tried to map into the choreography one by one. But now that you know the story, we can watch choreography again. Maybe parts of the movements that you saw will make more sense and actually map one to one. Sorry. Let's watch that piece again, and I can break it up and actually explain the parts before we do it ourselves. Hopefully that piece looked a little different now that you know what the story was, what the narrative was, it was trying to communicate. And I don't have that much time. Let me explain, at least very briefly, that's what the parts were. And so the whole beginning, just the very first few movements, were just about her kids, right? So turning around and just taking a moment to realize that this is a mother that accompanying her sick mother to Belial, effectively was saying goodbye to her kids. Right? So that just imagine that the emotional state and the sacrifice that she sort of made in loyalty to her mother. And then this hand here is actually meant to not be her hand, but her mother's hand, that she's grasping so ever so tightly. And even at the face of death, she has a hard time letting go of that hand. Oh, actually right there, the individual finger being pulled was the ring finger to give homage to the soldier ripping the ring off of her finger. And the hand pulling the face is meant to be the mother kind of forcing her away, forcing her towards her children. And this little circular movement is actually just meant to be kind of what's going on in her head. She kind of switches from one person to another person to another person, from her son to her daughter to her mother, having to decide sort of who to choose as she chooses herself. This is actually meant to be her heartbeat after she goes to the German soldier and says that she's Russian. And he responds that she's not, and he needs to get his superior's opinion. And just think of her at that moment, the way her heart must have been as she stood there waiting for the verdict of what she was and whether she was going to live or not. So this movement is meant to be directly sort of reference to just the heart. And here we're actually trying to show that she's no longer in her own hands. She's in somebody else's hands. As someone who's deciding what she is, right? For whatever reason, that is conflicting. She can't be both, but this is meant to be one side of her, let's say the Russian identity versus the other side being the Jewish identity. And the soldier is just sort of playing and choosing which one she is. And you can see that one behind because she's no longer, this is not her first to choose. And then the final verdict being, it doesn't matter. Either way, she's dead. So this is meant to be that sort of realization. And then actually this moment is, again, it's not her. This is actually the woman with the baby that was torn away from her and thrown in the pit. So that was, and her, of course, running after. And so that was meant to be kind of a homage to her being ripped away and then being pulled. Of course, and that mother is being pulled to your child no matter what. And in this instance, it's just straight up the murdering of one after the other. There's not too much to communicate there. I'll always do that. And here, that last little one with the arms and the legs, it's actually, I think I took that part of the text down just because there was no more room. But if you read her full testimonial, she writes that she kind of goes limb by limb. She doesn't know what's injured, it's not injured, if she's wounded. And it's just being in that state where you're no longer aware of how you are, where you are. That's what that's meant to be. And then here, this is just meant to be the breathing. There's a part in her text that mentioned that the ground was breathing. I can't imagine a worse state to be in then all those didn't die immediately to those pits, but were left breathing. Yeah, I can't think of something much worse. And then this part is actually meant to be forcing herself to, in the full testimony, you'll see she goes deeper into it, but in giving, kind of forcing herself to kind of pull out the strength to make it out of the pit and towards her kids. And that takes tremendous willpower. And there I showed it, not coming from me, but from the heels of me, pulling me forward, like it's something internal. And it's meant to be very literal with her coming out. And before there was kind of that handstand that goes down to falling into the pit, so this was meant to be the other way around, the handstand being reversed as in you are coming out of the pit. And then this little moment, just a reference to the 11-year-old that didn't make it with her, didn't make it out with her all the way. Okay, so this piece was a little extreme in being one-to-one match to testimony. Other pieces weren't quite like that. But in our last few moments together, no one has questions. The last part of tonight was meant to be interactive. To invite whoever wants to join, and I will teach you just the beginning. And we'll just do that movement together. Once relaxed, and then once a little more physical, and so you can kind of experience that bi-directional connection between emotions and physicality and emotions. Anybody want to participate? Want to take away the projector?
Gets close to the door, which for me wasn't. I don't know if it's for you, it wasn't. And the door stayed here. Our next step, and I want to introduce Alan, Margaret, and Tim Burgett, who have done all this work with us. We are the tree of life. Provide offering to the world. This is my objective to the world. The we performing arts are finally going to open.
Does anybody have it in them to go on stage and learn a piece or not? We got one. Okay. So honestly, the first time we're just going to close your eyes for a second. We're just going to listen to the music. Just 1 minute of it. So the music selection was meant to be sort of for the piece, the part we're going to do. Maybe I'll demonstrate first, then I'll explain. Then notice that that's the piece that we're like arm up, down, pull, back, down, good, back. And she comes, right? Next part is like, she mentioned her mother would say, we're walking, not, only later when in school, they're walking top of the mountain. Okay, so one thing right leg forward, left leg back. Go to the walk. Okay, it's 4 times. Now we'll begin. As you're walking, hands coming up. Pull it out. Strap down. And as you do it, sort of do it. You're really trying to fight it, deal with it, your body. Yeah. And now with here, grabbing the face. Again, the face turns with the hand, but again, this that's going to be the concho in your body. Even that sensation, that. And this is going to be on that forward. Okay, technically the presentation's over. It's exactly 8 p.m. Everyone wants to leave, can leave. And of course, you're welcome to stay. Technically, you can skip. But that's fine, lower. I'll go over the steps one more time. Make sure it's in. So I'm going to face down. So we're here. lower body. If you want to take the time, so. One more time. Does that make sense? Do you feel anything when you do it? And one more part I'd like to teach you today. Okay, one more part. Right after I'll continue here. Almost there. Yeah, this last one. So from here, arm goes behind you. And then keep up that. This is almost like someone dragging you through. Right? And then this is the part where I come. On that. Last time push. Then on the your chest and chin. Straight. Again, upper body, right arm, and finger back on top of it. And then the left hand pushes right. Right. Pushes right. Then right. Up onto your face. And right into the circle. And lower body. And it's just sort of an awkward walk. Right? That's right. Right. That's right. That's right. Right. Take it. And Who wants to have music? Music. Okay. So we're going to start on Tammuz. Push. Step. For your own time. And that is just don't be nice to yourself. Not this, this. Tend to like build up tension internally. That can make you uncomfortable inside. One time. Okay. Anybody has any questions or needs to like talk about it here? But otherwise, sorry. Otherwise, have a lovely evening. Thank you for joining us.
We Are the Tree of Life started almost with the Pittsburgh massacre synagogue. And today we are living a different story. That means I would like you to think about the following. If you can have a feedback immediately, it's beautiful. If not, you can always write to jackiegamache@hotmail.com. I was a few days ago watching a movie, La Rafle du Val d'Hiver, which is how the French police came in 1942, arrested 24,000 Jews living primarily in Paris, if I am correct, and took them to the Vélodrome d'Hiver. And it was the French police, it was not the Germans, it was the French police. And they took them to the Vélodrome d'Hiver, which is a sport arena. They spent over there 3-4 days with no food, nothing, families, just a suitcase with something in it. And finally, they were taken to Drancy, which was an internment camp, and sent to Auschwitz. And basically 90% of them passed away and were exterminated. And I was telling David,
This is awful. This is awful. How can we do that to a human being? And my following sentence was, but look what is happening today in our world. How many human beings are being suffering, are finding death, are murdered, and how are we going to take this education about the Holocaust and any genocide and get into a humanitarian help instead of the crisis? And this is very much in my head. How do we take our story of the Holocaust and bring it in to the world of today and try to escape through the door that you were presenting in the last image of your video? Please think about it. We have a responsibility. Please, I don't know what to do. I know I'm going to do something. I know you are going to do something. The same way that you were able to dance, and you were all great dancer. Even Tammuz was great. That means please find the way. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Alan, really. Alan, do you want to say the word? No, it's always like that. And play. I started 3 years ago with play. And when I talk to him, I say, I want to make a so exactly I'm doing it. Apologize, then it is not true. But he knows everything this year about Rosh Hashanah. Alan joined us, a year ago? And we are trying really to create some, how do you say that, visual, docu-series or whatever, as educational programs for the schools. And I have to say, within a very objective point, we are doing very well. I say we are because you are one of the branches. And I have the honor to say that the link that we have done of 72-minute docu-series is circulating in the visual center of television. How did that happen? It's because we are.
We have to leave for another hour plus.
I'm sorry?
There's enough 1 hour.
I need an emotional break and then engage. Did you have a question? Any question? I made the music as a choreographer. Sure, so I took a sample and then I played with it. And there was I had a slide on it, but there was the story, there was the arc, and then I edited the music into the arc of the story, and then I put the movement to it too. I couldn't find a song that worked with this story. For this story, I couldn't find a good song. I couldn't, all the music I listened to, nothing worked. And I took it from, there's like some, it's in the airport. That was in the airport. There's like a collection, a bunch of songs, and it was like a short transition period between the songs. It wasn't even in the song, it was just a transition. Just like the feel of that piece of music. And then I played with the other effects and cut it and put it together just to match the story I needed. And I was just looking for music added to the ambience, but didn't distract, because this piece didn't need more stuff. Didn't need music to take too much attention. Right. So actually, in those ones, there were partnership with musicians. And I was actually the very first piece that we can see today. And the music that was by Issa Weber, who herself perished in the Holocaust. So that's also part of the story. There was the dancer Edith Egger, the piece was about, and then the music that was used. And in the choreography, I sort of the choreography was meant to be only about Edith Egger, but I'm sure the channel happened with Issa Weber, but the music plays a big part. To the movement. Now, this is the first time I'm revealing what the movement is supposed to be. I don't know, so I'll know after the fact, after I ask people if it was good that I explained the movement or not. I don't know if it was good. Maybe. Yeah, that's true. No, you're right. I didn't know the answer. That's why I showed it a few times. I didn't know I wanted you to be focused on a different thing each time. So,
Aber, ihr schon? Ja.